Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's class. The lecture 3, we're going to talk about organizational theories, and also we're talking about organizing functions in the sports organizations. So, and in today's class, we're basically going to talk about 3 different things. First things, we're going to review some organizational theories and see how these theories can be applied in the sports industries and also in other industries. And then we're going to talk a little bit about organizational functions, and also we're going to talk about the organizational design. To begin with, we would like to talk a little bit about the organizational theories. So we basically have 3 theories we'd like to talk about. If you did the readings, you should remember those theories, and the reading has mentioned. First one is institutional theory. Second one is talking about strategic alliance. The third one is about network theories. So before we're introducing these organizational theories, we would like to talk a little bit about the changes. Right, all the organization will have to experience these changes internally and externally. Speaking of these changes, right, these changes can be classified into 4 different types. Right, first type of change I would say is like technology changes. We're using media as examples. So in the 19th centuries, newspaper and radio are the mainstream platform for sports organization to deliver their informations. Right. So in the beginning of the 20th centuries, most of the sports fans are using radio to obtain the information and read their local newspaper to know about the updates of their professional sports team that they have been supporting. So in 1950s, but televisions became the mainstream medias, and it also became the primary tool for the users to consume sports. And nowadays, 21st centuries, obviously, we have a lot of different way that we can consume sports, right? So a lot of people are using internet, we're using social medias, right? So sports organizations also have to embrace these changes in order to develop a closer relationship with their customers, right? So this is about technology changes. The second type of changes related to structure changes is how the organization changes itself in order to adapt it to the external changes. We talk about social media. It become a pretty important platform where sports fans can interact with each other, and sports fans and also have a platform where they can directly interact with their favorite athletes and the team they've been supporting. Right. So since social media is so big and more sports organizations started to create positions related to social media management, so they changed how sports organizations has been operated and its structures. So you find out more and more sports organizations create digital departments, recruiting the professionals to help them to operate their social medias, right? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchats. Now those all become pretty popular. So they need more than one people to recruit more than one people to operate their social media. So that's the structure changes. The third type of change is related to the people, the human capitals, right? People's comes and goes, employee comes and goes. So a lot of organization every year we have to recruit new employees, and also some employees is also retired, or some employee find out a better opportunity. They decided to jump on the new jobs, so they have to quit from your current organization. So people always change all the time for the organization. And last but not the least is about product and service. They also will have to changes. A lot of organizations will have to add the new products, right? Remove old-fashioned products, and also try to modify some of the existing products, make it look more appealing to the customers, right? We're using iPhone as examples, right? iPhone, we talk about every September. Apple will introduce a new versions of the iPhone to the markets, introduce some new changes, try to adapt it to some external changes as well, right? So those are the 4 main changes the organization have to face, right? Including technology changes, structure changes, human capital changes, as well as products and service changes. As we're looking at these organization theories, we start with the institutional theories first. Right, from the reading, you possibly know the institutional theories is basically talking about, try to explain why the organizations look very similar, right? And why they are following each other's, and why there are a lot of the motivation to change in the social settings, right? These theories was introduced in the end of 19th century. So it emphasized that the organization funding and changes are driven less by functional considerations, but more by symbolic actions, external pressures. For the institutional theorists, um, they find out why the organization look very similar. They find out there are three different processes. We call it three different isomorphic process that will lead to increased similarities or commonalities. So these three processes, one is called cohesive isomorphisms. The second one is called dynamic process. The third one is called nomadic process. So we're going to explain each of the process one by one. We start with cohesive isomorphism first. So what's a cohesive isomorphism? That indicate the organization, so they want to change it because they are facing a lot of external pressures. So those pressures might come from power relations and may also come from the political structures. So we're using two examples to explain about this. The first example is from college sports, right? I think you should be very familiar with the NCAA Title IX rules. So Title IX rules was the law that passed in 1972, where the purpose is to try to create more opportunities for women to participate in sports in the education, not just higher educations, but also in secondary educations, right? So NCAA, based on the Title IX, they also introduced the Title IX rules. So basically, they encourage sports organization in the college sports, in the athletic department, they try to add more women's sports and try to cut men's sports, right, in order to meet these requirements of this Title IX, in order to comply with this Title IX, right? Since this is a rule enforced by the NCAA, so all NCAA's members, they have to follow these rules. And otherwise, they may face the consequence that will include losing that memberships, NCAA memberships, right? So they have to comply with the Title IX. So that's one of the examples to explain cohesive isomorphism. So they're facing the external pressures. So they have to make the changes because this is the pressures up there, right? That's one example from college sport. We're also looking at a professional sport like NBA. NBA's rule for drafting. So for a lot of high school basketball players, if you really want to play in the NBA, you have to go through NBA draft, right? So based on the NBA's rule, you have to wait 1 year after you're graduating from your high school. So you find out a lot of basketball players, when they graduate from the high school, they decided to go to university, to play for a year, and then they started to get prepared and get ready for the NBA draft, right? NCAA also allowed these non-draft players to go back to schools and continue with their education, right? So NCAA basically, they say, oh, you definitely can go try to go pro, but it's likely for you to be selected, or it's also another situation is you will not be selected by any of the NBA teams. So if you're not be able to select it by the NBA teams, you might actually lose your education and also lose the opportunity to become professional players. So to address that issues, the NCAA actually allowed these undrafted players come back to school and continue complete their education. So this rule was introduced in 2018. So when this rule was introduced, so all these member institutions have to follow, right? So you're facing the external pressure. So those are rules that you have to follow. So that is how we explain the cohesive isoformation, which is the first isoformation process. The second isoformation process is called dynamic process. So dynamic process is talking about the organizations. They want to duplicate a very successful strategy for other organizations when they're facing those uncertainties, right? So we're also going to use one sports-related and one non-sports related examples. Well, we're using one non-sports related example is we're also talking about iPhone. So iPhone this year is basically 11 years. Right, 11 years ago, the first generation of the iPhone was introduced to the markets. So think about what iPhone has changed how we using electronic devices. Before iPhone, we were using like a phone. We're not call them smartphone, right? We're using Nokia. Some students might remember we're using all keyboards Nokia at that time. Think about when iPhone was introduced in 2008. What made iPhone so unique at that time? So iPhone, first of all, you don't need to have a keyboard anymore, right? You have a screen, and you can have a lot of you can type all the numbers, and you also can type all the letters there through the screens, right? There's no keyboards anymore, right? The most important thing, iPhone, that changed how we using electronic devices is become smartphone, right? We have all the applications inside the systems. That's very easy for people to get access to internet, and very easy for people to complete online shoppings, very easy for people to communicate with each others, right? So you feel the entire world connected more often than before, and it's also easier for people to continue to get these updates informations, right? So you find out from iPhone 1 to iPhone 11, so every year iPhone will introduce new versions of the iPhone. They will make some changes, right? Sometimes they will change the design, right? Sometimes they will add some Face ID, right? Sometimes they made their Siri more smaller than before. Sometimes they will update their cameras, right? You find out when iPhone made the changes, other organizations, other smartphone companies are also doing the very similar things, right? Their phones look very, very similar nowadays, right? If you have an iPhone here, have a Samsung there, they look very, very similar function-wise. Just they're using very different systems, right? iPhone uses their own system, Samsung using Android system, which is created by Google, right? So they're using different systems, but the design look very similar, all the functions look very, very similar. So because all the company try to duplicate successful strategy for the other organization when they face uncertainty, right? So this is one of example for the non-sports related business. As we look at sports related business, we're using our SLAM major as example. Some students might know that we're currently creating sports analytic minors. So why do we have to create sports analytic minors? Because that's a trend, right? Because there's so many jobs in the sports analytics out there, right? So many students are also very, very interested in this area. And also other sports management programs also, creating a sports analytics minor or majors, and try to, provide more opportunity for students to master skills, right? Because this follow the trends, right? So we try to duplicate for each other very successful strategies, right, in order to be succeed in the markets, right? This is called dynamic process. Third type of process called nomadic process. It occurs as organizations draw on similar resource pools in terms of the consultant and university. So a lot of times, so you have to follow that because we receive the funding sources from them. Right? We're using sports example is Sports Canada. Sports Canada is a Canadian national Olympic organization. So you find out, so that's a study conducted in 2010. They examined 36 national level sports organizations in Canada. So they find out all these organizations basically adopt the same professional design. They all adopt like bureaucratic professional design, right? When they develop the organizational plan, they all develop a 4-year plan, because this is required by Canadian National Olympic Committee, Sports Canada, right? Because all those members, they're receiving the funding from Sports Canada. So if they don't really follow the requirements by Sports Canada, they might actually lose their fundings. So that's why you find out all these sports national-wise organizations, they look very similar. They use a very similar structure, right? They're using a similar strategy to develop their organizational plan. They're even creating a very similar position internally, right? So because they're having these pressures, they're receiving the resources, receiving the funding from the national Olympic committees, right? So this is example for the nomadic process. So we have three different types of process to explain why the organization nowadays that we have are look very, very similar to others. So why don't they have the motivation to make the changes, right? So these are three different process. Well, the second theory we're going to talk about today is about strategic alliance. So strategic alliance is talking about is a formally negotiating relationship between two or more organizations formed as a response to key opportunities in the organization's environments. So you find out a lot of time, all the organizations try to go and look for the partners, right? Try to cooperate with others, exchange resources in order to make themselves become very competitive in the markets. So those are strategic alliance. So we have three types of strategic alliance. So one is joint venture, one is collaboration, one is consortiums. Right? The reason the business want to collaborate with each other because they can share the risk, they can improve the market positioning, and also they help them to learn from each other to continue to improve. Right. So we're using one of the example is World Baseball and Softball Confederations. So baseball, softball in the past, they are actually have a separate international governing body. So baseball has an international baseball federation, softball have an international softball federation. They were completely separate. Some of you, if you follow the Olympic, you know 2008 was the last time for baseball and softball was included in the Olympic Games. So after 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, baseball, softball has not been included in Olympic programs. So there are a lot of reasons. So one of the reasons obviously is about doping. Right, doping is a big concern, and the second issue is about when Olympic baseball game is ongoing. So a lot of Major League Baseball players are not playing, right? Because their MLB is still ongoing as well. So MLB decided not let their player to be part of the Olympic Games. So a lot of star is another reason why the Olympic Games decided not to include baseball and softball, right? And also now the third, which is also a very important reason, is baseball and softball, they only have one gender sport participate in the Olympic Games, which is contribute with the value of the Olympic Games. They try to provide equal opportunity for both men and women. So that's why baseball and softball has not been included in the Olympics since 2008. And one last reason is about their lacking popularity worldwide. So baseball and softball only popular in certain markets in Europe. So very few countries are actually playing baseball and softball. So that's why baseball, softball has not been included in the Olympic Games. In order to come back to the Olympic programs, so baseball, softball started to make some changes, started to develop some corporate partnerships. So one thing they did is they decided to create one international governing bodies, which is World Baseball and Softball Confederations. So now they address one of the issues, right? They only provide one gender sports. They try to become a one organizations, and they will bid for the Olympic Games. For some of you, if you're going to watch 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games, you find out baseball, softball will be included in 2020 programs. Right, so this is one of the examples for the strategic alliance. In order to achieve some goals, we have to develop some partnerships. Right, we have different types of partnership. One type of partnership called joint venture. Right, joint venture is first type of partnership is an entity that formed between two or more parties to undertake economic activities. So what made joint venture the strategy you need is, first of all, you need to develop a new business. So normally two or more business, they decide to create a new business. They pull off their resources, create a new business. And also both parties need to contribute equally, and then they share in revenues, expense, and control of the expertise enterprise. Right. So one of the example is ESPN and news corporations. So you might know ESPN is really important television, sports televisions in the United States, and ESPN also they try to get involved with more markets outside of United States. So they try to expand it to the Europes. They try to expand it to Africa and also try to expand it to Asia. So when ESPN tried to expand it to Asia, they find out we don't really have a very clear understanding about what the Asian markets will look like, particularly media markets. So they said we need to cooperate it with the other business, and then they decided to cooperate it with news corporations. And then they create a channel called ESPN Star Sports, the headquarters in Singapore, right? So this is an example for the joint ventures. I'm not quite familiar with this market entering brand new markets. I would rather to collaborate it with another market and create a separate entities, right? So joint venture, one thing make it unique is you need to create a separate entity that both parties or more than two parties will have to share these risks equally, share these revenues, and invest it very equally and evenly, right? So this is joint ventures. The second type of strategic alliance called consortiums. So unlike joint venture that they have to create a separate business entity, joint venture is about associations of two or more organizations with the objective of participating in the common activity of putting their resources together for achieving a specific purpose. So most of the time for the consultants, all this business, they're coming from the same industries. So they mainly put their resources together, share their resources together to maximize this benefits. So one of the example is airline business, right? If you're taking airline business, right, you might have heard about Star Airlines, right? Star Airlines, including United Airlines and also some other about another 30 airlines all around the world. So they basically work really closely with another airline for all around the world. They're sharing all their airlines. So for instance, initially, before Star Airline was introduced, right, if you want to fly out from Chicago to Paris, you might have to, the only option you have is a United Airlines, right? Maybe United Airlines can only offer one airplane a day, right? But with the introductions of the Star Airlines, so United Airlines can cooperate with the Air France, or can work with other airlines. You can have more opportunity to fly out from Chicago to Paris, right? So this is one of the example for the consortium. So all this business, normally they're coming from the same industry. They put their resource together and provide a better service to their customers, so everyone can benefit from each other, right? So this is one example. So the second example is about for sports, right? We have SEC network, we have ACC networks. So for college sport, we have conferences, right? So for all the institutions, they're not going to negotiate the broadcasting right with this broadcaster by themselves, but they create a conference to negotiate the broadcast rights together. The reason they want to create a conference is and negotiate the broadcast right collaboratively because they can maximize the revenues. So all those institutions, they have to share some of their resources, allow their games to be broadcast in these networks. They have to collaborate it together, and they can help them maximize the revenue they're going to generate from broadcasting games on the networks, right? So this is the second types of city alliance consortiums. The third types of alliance is called collaborations, right? Collaborations also we call partnerships. So it's agreements between two and more companies that wish to pursue mutually benefit goals when remaining completely separate entities. So a lot of time collaborations are between the business coming from completely different industries. So normally both companies will use each other's strengths, so they can make some powerful impacts. As one of the example is MFL and U2. So they develop called strategic partnerships. So the benefit for the MFL is their games, their highlights can be watched on YouTube. For some of the YouTube users, maybe they're not huge football fans, but they're able to watch the games, watch some highlights, try to get to more audiences. What you too can get benefit from these corporate partnerships. Is obviously you can create some football programs, attract more MFL fans and football fans to consume the products on their platforms, right? So they normally are coming from different industries. They're able to use their strengths to work together, develop these partnerships. So this is collaborations. What we look at is three different types of the Stitch Alliance. So what are the main differences? We'll give you a quick summaries here. Joint venture. First of all, they have to form up new business entities. Right? They normally have a deeper cooperations compared to another two types of the Stitch Alliance. Consortiums. So they have to put the resource together and reach to a common purpose. Right? Most of the time, those business are coming from the same industries. For the collaborations, they normally have the business coming from different industries, and they use each other's strengths to develop a strategic partnership. So those are the difference between the three types of strategic alliance. We're using two examples to help you understand this concept better. So first example is 1993 Starbucks. They partner with the Barnes and Noble bookstores to provide in-house coffee shops, benefiting both retailers. So think about this example. What types of Stitch Alliance does it belong to and why? So think about Starbucks and Barnes and Noble. They are coming from two very different industries, right? So they are collaborations, right? They use each other's strengths to promote their products, right? To maximize the benefits. The second example is on the right is the NCAA grant approval of the agreement between Newbury College and Hellenic College that now allow full-time students of Hellenic College to participate in athletics with Newbury College. So the goal of this agreement is to let both colleges work together to improve the students' experience for all students. Look at this example. Which Stitch Alliance strategy that we talked about previously can explain these corporate partnerships? Right, so they are coming from the same industries, right? So this is consortium, right? This is a consortium. They're putting their resource together, right? Okay, so this is the three types Stitch Alliance. So one last theory we're going to talk about is the network theories. So unlike Stitch Alliance, they mainly try to emphasize is a learning basis. So network theories is a skill-based partnerships involving more than two partners. It's a set of actors which are linked by formal or informal social relationships of a specific time. So the benefit for using the networks is they can increase flexibilities, reduce uncertainties, increase capacities of productions, and access to skill and knowledge of the informations. So one of the examples that using network theories, skill-based partnerships is a Coca-Cola. You find out Coca-Cola is actually developing a pretty good network with a lot of fast food chains, right? They actually take advantage of these fast food chains to distribute their products, sell their products to more customers, right? Enhance their products awareness. For those fast food chains, they can also use their product to attract more customers and increase their sales, right? So they develop a network. Now, one Coca-Cola collaborated with so many different fast food chains. You're able to drink Coca-Cola at so many different places, right? So they create a network, right? Those are skill-based partnerships, right? So those are three different types of theory that we learned in the first part of the lecture today, right? Try to refresh your memory. First theory is institutional theories. Institutional theory, we explain why the organization look very similar to one another. Or the second theory we talk about is the Stitch Alliance. We talk about how business collaborated and cooperated with each others. And the third theory is the network theories. Right, so this is the first part of today's lecture. The second part of today's lecture, we're going to talk about organizing functions.